You are watching Hillsborough Television, programming that keeps you informed about the services and activities of your county government.
Hello and welcome to Beyond Today, the program that addresses the future of our community through conversations with people who are working today for a better tomorrow. I'm Ray Shermonte, your host for Beyond Today and Assistant Executive Director for the Hillsborough County City-County Planning Commission. In our last program, we looked at community rebirth in Tampa Heights. Our guest today is Michael M. English, five-time chairman of the Hillsborough County City-County Planning Commission, who recently announced his resignation. Michael was appointed to represent the City of Tampa on the Planning Commission in 1987. He is a principal in his own consultant firm, the English Company. He is a member of the Board of Directors for the Northwest Hillsborough Water Basin Board, the Tampa Union Station, Inc., and the Tampa Ybor Street Railway Society. Mike, we've known each other for probably over 20 years, and I know you've been involved in planning in this community for a long time. But I'd like to ask you a little bit, when did you come to Tampa? How did you move to the Tampa Bay area?
My family moved to Florida when I was a young child. I was 2, to Sarasota, which is where I grew up. And I went through elementary school and high school in Sarasota and Bradenton, and moved to Tampa after I graduated from Florida State in 1971. So I've been in Tampa for about 25 years, and we've known each other for almost that length of time.
Right, yes. Well, I know planning has changed in this community so much. We worked together at the Planning Commission back in the early 70s, and it was quite a different world then. How serious was planning taken here in the early 70s?
I'm sure that depends on who you were at the time. When we met, the Planning Commission had a fairly large staff and was trying to prepare the first comprehensive plan, the Horizon 2000 plan, and we were both youngsters at that point in time. And I was a graduate student in anthropology and an intern at the Planning Commission. And planning was something that the state legislature felt was very important for every community in the state to do, but the people who lived in the community either didn't know much about it or felt somewhat threatened by it, which was really the initial reaction to our first comprehensive plan.
Mike, you stated your degree, I guess, is in anthropology?
That's right. I have a master's degree in urban anthropology, which is the application of anthropological principles to the urban problem-solving context. And it has been a wonderful degree for me. It really allowed me, at the same time I was learning about urban planning, to find a way to come to understand better the cultural values of the community that we live in, and somehow be able to apply urban planning principles with that sort of worldview. So it's been very helpful over the years.
So I guess what you're really saying is each community is fairly unique based on its past and its cultural values, and planning has to fit in some way. It can't just be textbook.
Oh, no question about it. There are a number of sociological and anthropological theories that would suggest that every community is unique, and that the values in a community are really formed at the time the community is formed. That the people who establish the churches and the banks and the style of land ownership and the method of justice instill values in a community which persist to the modern day. And so, in order to understand how a city has developed, in order to understand how it might change, you really have to know where it came from and who the people were that started the community.
When you started out in planning back in the early 70s, I know we were working on a comprehensive plan at that time. What were the really big issues in the early 70s, and how are they different from today's issues?
Well, in the early 70s, when we began doing comprehensive planning, great suburban growth was just beginning to occur. and flight from the center of the city and urban decay was just becoming well understood. We were still building roads. We weren't interested in transit. We were having a hard time understanding the connection between rural areas and urban areas. We didn't entirely connect the development that was being allowed in the suburbs with the decay in the inner city. So those first plans were our first attempt to take zoning and code enforcement and the provision of public utilities and the expenditure of capital funds and apply them in a way that would be guided by goals and policies of a comprehensive plan and by a future land use map. I mean, today we've become, and it's been 25 years nearly, much more sophisticated about that, I guess is the best way to say it.
One of the interesting things I find about being here is we've gone to having fairly strict growth management regulations. But if you go into the past of Tampa and Hillsborough County, how important was planning, say, 30 or 40 years ago?
Well, I think that in 1959, when Sam Gibbons and the state legislature felt compelled to form the Planning Commission, they did it because they felt that the growth patterns of Tampa and Hillsborough County weren't particularly satisfactory, that there was little growth control, there was a great deal of entrepreneurship underway, things didn't look very good, the community was beginning to creak and groan as on the basis of its unplanned growth, and so the Planning Commission was part of a movement to impose a reasonable amount of order on the development of the community. So sure, things have changed a great deal in that period of time.
Can you explain a little bit about the structure of the Planning Commission for our audience? It's a citizen board, just how it works.
Surely. Well, the Planning Commission initially is unique in that it has a 10-member board. I say unique in the state of Florida, we believe it is. There are 10 members, 4 are appointed by the Hillsborough County Commission, 4 by the Tampa City Council, and 2 each by the City Commissions of Temple Terrace and Plant City. The employees of the Planning Commission work directly for the Planning Commission and its executive director, who is hired by the members of the Planning Commission. So in that regard, it is an independent body in the sense that the employees don't work for the county administrator or the clerk of the courts. They work directly for the Planning Commission. The funding for the Planning Commission is from countywide ad valorem. Historically, we have received our funding in a fairly reasonable way from them, although on a year-to-year basis sometimes we find ourselves embroiled in controversial issues which make our funding feel threatened. We've been fortunate over the years to be pretty well funded. We are the local land planning agency by law for all 4 of the jurisdictions, and we also provide a research capacity to the whole community, as you know. I'm not sure our listeners do, but and we provide a lot of other services throughout the community that aren't directly to the cities or the county, but indirectly. So the Planning Commission is a wonderful planning resource that now has nearly 40 years of history behind it.
I think one thing that people are sometimes unclear of, they'll ask, well, if we have a Planning Commission, why do things not seem planned that well in some cases? And maybe you can explain our role as not being the final word sometimes in issues.
Well, certainly. I mean, the Planning Commission makes recommendations, advisory recommendations to the City Council or the County Commission. But perhaps from a bigger picture perspective, the answer is that life is not orderly, and that we have almost 1 million people in Hillsborough County. Those people have been building buildings, and we've been building roads and infrastructure and shopping centers and downtowns and suburbs for over 100 years. The city of Tampa just enjoyed its 111th birthday. It's a fairly old city. The Planning Commission has been here since 1959. I think that the process of shaping community values and encouraging community leadership, which includes elected and other kinds of officials, to exert the will and self-discipline necessary to shape growth is as challenging for us as it is for any other city in the United States. I think by the same token, we've made a significant difference. I think the Planning Commission has played a very important role in the development of the community for the past 40 years, and I think that if you could look at the the attitudes 35 or 40 years ago, or even 10 or 15 years ago about planning, and compare them to the attitudes today, you'd see a dramatic difference.
So you would say that the attitudes today might be a little bit more favorable toward planning than they were 40 years ago?
Well, surely, and in some cases it's because the problems are so much more evident. There are almost 14 million people in the state of Florida, and it's obvious that that growth is both a boon and a major challenge for us to deal with. How you accommodate a fragile environment such as Florida has, and in accumulating people in major urban centers and connecting them and building roads and providing for environmental protection is a huge challenge. And it's the hugest challenge when growth is inexorable, which it's been in Florida since the 1950s, really since after World War II.
One of the things I sense being around this area for some time is when I was a child, it seemed like the cities of the Tampa Bay area were more separate. In fact, I'm not even sure if that term was used at that time. And then they all kind of grew together, and it was a little bit, this big city was thrust upon us. How do you feel about that? Does that kind of follow your view of what's happened, or?
Well, when I was a child in Sarasota in 1952, it was a long, lonely drive to Bradenton, which was only 10 or 12 miles away. And dogs really could sleep in the middle of old US 41 in the summer. There was no one there. And it was a very long drive to St. Petersburg or Tampa to Christmas shop or on a family outing. Today, there aren't many open stretches. And the same is true in Tampa and through the areas that at one time were Tampa countryside. I've heard stories of people our age who were kids who hunted in Palmacia in South Tampa when they were kids. Well, that certainly isn't the case anymore. So it's a function of growth. The Tampa Bay area was fairly dispersed and physically separated when we were kids, and today I think that Tampa is really the economic and governmental center of a large, virtually unified region of 3 million people.
And that's, I guess, one of the biggest changes I guess we've seen happen very quickly. It seems like that happened very fast, and we may not have been ready for it.
Sure. I mean, Florida had only, 2.5 million people 40 years ago, and imagine that we've added 12 million people in less than 40 years. How you accommodate that level of growth is something that no one's ever understood in the history of the world. So I'm not sure we're doing all that badly, frankly.
Well, as we kind of jump ahead to where we are now, what do you see as some of the big growth management issues in 1998 that we're having to deal with?
Well, we have we're just about to complete the process of updating our comprehensive plan for the third time since 1989. And I think that plan, that the changes that we've recommended, that the County Commission appears interested in supporting, are at a point where we have defined an urban form, and I think that now the major issues involved in that comprehensive plan will be in its implementation. I think it's very important that we consider mobility alternatives. It's very important that we concentrate on mobility alternatives for people, that we protect existing open spaces and wetlands, that in fact we take what is becoming a mature urban environment or mature environment and shape it for civility, shape it for livability. I think that's the challenge in the next 25 or 30 years in Florida. And we're certainly a major Florida urban center, and so we face that challenge as truly as Miami or Jacksonville or the Orlando area.
Now, one time, I guess the Planning Commission was more involved in implementation than it is now. What is the contrasting differences? Is that a good or bad thing, or?
I don't know that it's good or bad, but it certainly is somewhat different. Originally, when you and I first worked at the Planning Commission, they were reviewing zoning recommendations and reviewing subdivision plats, which were the classic way that you implemented a comprehensive plan. Today, Hillsborough County government is much more sophisticated and has a great deal of current planning and implementation capability. I think it's critically important that the Planning Commission continue to become more thoughtfully integrated into the efforts of the county government, so that as we continue to find more sophisticated ways to suggest policy guidelines for a comprehensive plan. We're also involved in helping the county government implement that plan. I don't see it as a separate process in the way we used to. I see it much more as a challenge which will require the resources of everyone we have involved. I'm not sure that was clear to you, but I feel very strongly that the planning environment needs to continue to respond to the increasing complexities that that we're facing in this kind of modern day.
We talked a little bit about the growth pressures of suburban development, things of that nature, but what is happening not only in Tampa but in other cities to our inner cities? I sense that there is a relooking at inner cities for development opportunities. Tell us what's happening there.
I think everyone probably has a right to a reasonable theory about that. Mine, I think, is that World War II was a tremendous eye-opener for the people of the United States, particularly our parents' generation. They traveled, they fought in a big war, and when they came back, they were no longer satisfied with the urban patterns of pre-World War II United States. We had industrial capacity, we had the need for mobility, and so we had massive relocations by industry. We had massive interest in moving to new places. We had people meeting during the war years from different places in the United States, and people marrying people from other places in other countries. So the world changed after World War II. We built a major airline system. We built an interstate system. We relocated industry. We all came to the Sun Belt. I think that, and we built a lot of roads. I really think that after almost 50 years of an expansionist pattern, which is really, we've doubled the population of the United States in that period of time, we've all reached the point where we're on the outermost, the theoretical, conceptual outermost edges of the suburbs, and we're looking around and we're looking at congestion, and we're looking at lack of city services, and we're looking at how far away we've come from our roots. And so the tendency to begin to look back within is upon us, in a sense, and whether that's urban tourism or a sense that you can't have a community without the center being healthy, or an interest in mass transit as a legitimate alternative way to move, or the interest in personal health as exemplified by greenways and pedestrian ways in and out of cities and suburbs, I'm not sure, but we're on a new major trend, and I think it's just now becoming evident. I think the next 10 years of our lives will really show some wonderful changes in people's attitudes and beliefs about what our city should look like.
Now, what type of assets or what type of development do you see coming back into the city? The same as was there before, or a different trend?
Oh, I think adaptive reuse is a phrase that describes well what I think, which is that we won't bring back the factories of the 20s or the 10s or the 30s, but hopefully we'll bring back reasonable reuses of existing structures that deserve to be saved. We will redefine our economy as we've been doing for 25 years here. We will pursue ways to encourage people to come back to live in the inner city. We may end up with more density as a matter of choice in certain locations, and we may find that that's really not important. What really is important are finding ways to make neighborhoods livable everywhere for people, whether it's a suburban or an old suburban or a new suburban or an old urban neighborhood. I think that reusing resources that you have is really the name of the game.
One of the things I think you've been involved in is looking at our waterfront here in Tampa, which I'm not sure we've utilized to the best of our ability. Can you tell us what your feelings are about what we need to do along our waterfront, or what the problems are?
Well, I think in a lot of respects we're beginning to do those things. Tampa is in an ironic physical position with regard to its waterfront. We're not a beach community. Kids who grew up in Pinellas County or Manatee or Sarasota County are at the beach all day, every day, when they have an opportunity, because it's a 10-minute drive or a 15-minute drive. We go to the beach in Pinellas County or Manatee or Sarasota. So we boat, but we don't beach. And people's idea of Florida is to go to the beach. Well, we're not a beachy place. And Tampa has always had an urban waterfront with a hard edge. I think that it was never a resort town, it was a business town. It didn't have beaches, it had a hard industrial edge or a shipping port edge to its center city. And I think that we're beginning to take the concepts of urban tourism and pedestrian and bicycle ways and to redefine our urban waterfront in those ways. The things that are happening in downtown Tampa right now on the southern end of the waterfront are going to create wonderful access for visitors and residents alike to not swim in the Ybor Channel, but to look at it, to eat next to it, to stroll next to it, to take a cruise ship away from it, to boat to it, to see events, to visit the Ice Palace by boat, to go to the Performing Arts Center by boat. And I think those kinds of things are a matter of national trend as well as local trend.
So we're in a good position to take advantage, I guess, of these trends.
Oh yeah. Yeah, this is a really wonderful city. It really has the potential to be a very unusual and unique opportunity for an urban experience in a southern place with great waterfront and excellent entertainment and really nice old neighborhoods. And we're right on the edge of getting to, I think, the next level of health and sophistication.
One of the things I've always found interesting is Tampa is you have downtown Tampa and you have Ybor City and Hyde Park and a lot of different areas that have been somewhat separate. And I know you're involved in an effort, I believe, to try to tie these areas together. Can you tell us about this trek of the Street Railway Society, how it came to be and where we are now?
Well, it's a wonderful thing. Tampa had one of the finest streetcar systems in the South until 1946. It was dismantled at the same time most streetcar systems were taken out of operation after World War II, really to encourage the use of public transportation through buses, and so the system was dismantled quickly and disappeared. It had originally been begun and was operated by Tampa Electric, and it was probably becoming difficult to run it economically at that time anyway. Well, it was a very popular system. People that used it loved it, and it went all over old Tampa. For at least 20 years, there have been a lot of folks who would like to who wanted a vintage line to come back, and lo and behold, that's going to happen with the support of Sharon Dent and the Heartline Board and the very most important support from the Mayor of Tampa and the Tampa City Council and the Florida Department of Transportation. We are going to build a vintage electric streetcar line that will connect the convention center and its new hotel at the south end of downtown Tampa with the Channel District and the Florida Aquarium and Ybor City, which is our national historic district. It will be a almost 2.75 mile long line with vintage Bernie streetcars running with overhead electric, and it will connect events and parking and really allow Tampa for the first time in 50 years to be the kind of urban place that you can visit for 2 or 3 days and do interesting things and park your car and get from place to place on a train. This is the first rail start in Tampa in almost 100 years.
Now, when can we expect to ride on our first vintage streetcar? What is the plan timing-wise?
Well, final design is underway. The streetcars are about to be ordered to be constructed and renovated and/or renovated. And we expect to break ground. I think the mayor's expectation is the system will break ground by mid-year next year and hopefully be open in early 2000. So everyone's very excited about the idea that the streetcar line could open about the same time the new Convention Center Hotel opens, which should greatly activate the public waterfront down there. There are several other entertainment-oriented projects that are very serious about being built and opening about the same time. So that we could have dramatic differences in how things function down there in about 1.5 years or 2 years.
Mike, we have a few minutes left. I'd like to ask you, when you look in your crystal ball in the future, being a planner, what do you see in 40 years? What kind of place do you want this to be? Can you kind of describe what you see in your mind, I guess, if all the things you believe in kind of came to pass?
that's probably a bigger picture than I'm capable of answering today, Ray. But I really think that Tampa needs to, as all communities do, utilize its capabilities and its natural assets. We really have a very nicely contained urban place. We have growth. We have strong economic development. We need to protect our natural resources. We need to protect and enhance the physical neighborhood quality that we have. We need to continue to redevelop the city center, our downtown. We need to encourage a balance of mixed use in our urban center, in the Channel District, in Ybor City. We need mass transit, we need a train system, and we need a way for all the residents in this community to move from their homes to employment. We need to encourage our school system to be as good as it can possibly be. There is nothing standing in the way of this community being a truly wonderful, livable place. It's a very pleasant place to live now, and it should only become more so. I think that urban planning plays a big role in that. People like you and Bob Hunter and the Planning Commission and the people who work very hard to further the goals of urban planning in this community are key to its future, and which is why I've been more than happy to spend the time I have in the Planning Commission. It's a very important effort, and I feel very good about our future. I think we're headed in the right direction.
Well, it's a very positive note, I think, to wind up our interview with you, and I'd like to thank you for being here today, and thank you for all the time and years that you've served on the Planning Commission, which is an unpaid position, as I'm sure a lot of people don't know, so that's all volunteer time, and we appreciate that. Again, I'd like to thank Mike for being with us today, and we'll join you again next month with Beyond Today. Thank you.